Hi folks, Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, back again for another Sunday session. Had a couple of technical challenges getting here today, had some power issues and only just got the computer back up and running in time. So if I'm a little frazzled during this particular episode, I apologize in advance. I can see a couple of people coming on board already. So hi Margaret, Vanessa, Luke and Shelley, can see you all jumping in. So welcome aboard. And Brad as well. Vanessa says, hi Rob, hello, how are you? Just while we're waiting for a couple of people to join, might go through a couple of little housekeeping elements. Had a fantastic session in Melbourne yesterday. Flew back from there this morning. Fantastic group there. Kicked on well into the night with several of the people. Found a nice little hidden bar that had to pull a little book to go in the bookcase in order to get into the secret room. So that was well and truly worth it. May go back there again for another one in the next visit or two. Upcoming events for us in our next meetup is actually in Brisbane on the 3rd Saturday of the month, and that is the 20th of July. But other than that, we've actually got some information sessions coming up on the next day. We have a meetup in each of the states, being Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. So our normal meetups in those events, we're going to have still run those, but we're also going to have a morning session. And that morning session is going to, I guess, be a free 3-hour session for anyone who is interested at all in actually learning how to, I guess, start your property development journey, which is a little bit about today's theme. I'm not going to steal all of the thunder of that day. But I'm going to give you a couple of little tidbits into that process. So, but yeah, welcome aboard. I can see a massive crowd jumping on already. So Brad, Michael, Luke, Alex, Tendai, Rob, and Cameron. So Luke says a few bourbons. No, mate, no bourbons, but plenty of beer. So I guess there was some fun and frivolity that was occurring there. So very good. Okay, so those dates for those info sessions and next meetups, just for everyone's benefit. The first one is going to be kicking off in Sydney on the 27th of July. That is, again, info session in the morning and meetup in the afternoon. The next one will be in Melbourne, and that's on the 3rd of August. And the one after that will be in Brisbane, which will be the 17th of August. So all of those, if anyone is looking to find out how to start in the property development process, then feel free to turn up to those sessions. So a couple more jumping on. Gee, it's a full house today, folks. So Dean, Adam, Dean says hello as well. So welcome, folks. Today's session is about how to start in property development, but I thought I would start with why start in property development. I guess there's a lot of people interested in the property development journey or interested in property per se, but sometimes they're not really sure, I guess, the difference between property investing and property developing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and also what some of the motivations are as to how and why some people want to get into property and or property development. So I might actually start there, and effectively, if we have a look at some statistics that are sitting around, and I'm not one for quoting statistics all the time, but the Australian Superannuation Financial Association, which is a little bit of a mouthful, doesn't really roll off the tip of your tongue. They did some research to, hey, Emily and Michael has also joined as well. So welcome, folks. So the ASFA did some statistics to say what do people actually need in retirement? And crazily enough, what they've worked out is that people don't need a lot to actually get into retirement. And the reason for that is that retirement is really enough residual income to pay for your debts. And if you don't have a lot of debts, then you're not going to have, I guess, a lot of requirement for residual income. That said, the numbers that they came up with were quite alarming in that they were so minuscule that most people actually struggle to get their head around them. So what they're saying is that if you are a single, if you own your home outright, and if you're in good working health, then you can retire on a meager $24,500 a year, which sounds like an insanely crazy amount. If you are a couple, they say that you can retire on just shy of $35,000. Now, I don't know about you, but that's going to be a very meager lifestyle. You're not going to be going out and doing a lot of, I guess, fun. You're not going to be able to do a lot of holidays, those sorts of things. So instead, what they've said is, well, if you want to have a comfortable lifestyle where you go on a holiday or two and those sorts of things, then those figures increase a little bit to just under $44,000 if you're a single, and just over $60,000 if you're a couple. Now, $60,000 per year as a couple, if you've got no debts at all, surprisingly, that is a relatively comfortable lifestyle, but it's not as comfortable as I'd like to be. But in order to do that, you really only need to own 2 investment properties outright or something along those lines, or have some good funds in your self-managed super fund or something along those lines. The challenging part, despite those really incredibly low figures, is that the University of Melbourne, along with Towers Watson, did a study to see how many people are actually going to make those meager figures. And this is where the really alarming part comes in, because only 53% of couples and 22% of singles are actually on track to actually achieve those goals. So 50% of us aren't going to make it. Or 50% of couples are not going to make it. And that's the alarming part. And so that's why there is such an interest in trying to invest in property, because they need to supplement their self-managed super funds, and why some people want to do property development, because they need to accelerate that. That said, I highly encourage that whilst you can make significant money in property and property development, that you take a very slow and measured approach. I'm not one for the big bang. I'm very much about going in, doing a small project, getting some runs on the board, getting your comfort level up, and as you start to build your nest egg, grow that a little bit, then do a medium one, then do a large one. If you follow the journey in that very slow approach, I'm finding that most of the people in our community that actually do, I guess, follow the process, 3 to 5 years is a very achievable goal to actually to be approaching that financial freedom side of things. So it can be done, folks. And I personally am on a goal to set 1,000 people financially free by the year 2030. So it is my privilege to be sharing the information that I've got with you guys, so that you can do it as well. So if you're thinking about property, why would you do property investment versus property development? That's probably the next part of the question that most people ask. Well, property investing is when you put a small amount of effort in up front. You research what property might be having a long-term capital gain. You buy that property, and then you sit back and you wait for the market to do the heavy lifting. The challenge with that is the market goes up and down and takes quite some time to actually turn around and move in the direction that you want. And many people, well, I guess typically the figures are quoted at that the property will double in value every 7 to 10 years. That's really dependent on whether or not you've actually purchased in the right place. But the challenge there is that most people that go into property investing tend to do it with negative gearing in mind, because they've been advised by their accountant or financial planner that negative gearing is going to be helping them to do that by subsidizing or being supplemented by their tax deductions and have the ATO fund half of their investment. The reality of that, though, is that you start to hit glass ceilings, because if you're negatively gearing, that means your cash flow is going out. You've got money going out of your pocket. So you're not actually going to be able to afford the second property or the third property, because as you acquire more properties, you get more and more negative cash flow. So the banks start to look at you even more negatively. So the challenge there is that you hit this glass ceiling and how many properties you can actually purchase if you're doing that negative gearing approach. The net result of that is that the number of people who own one investment property is around 1.8 million people. About 1.8 million people, I should say, have investment properties. Of those, 73% only own one property, and they don't go on to buy the second or third property. 18% of people have two properties, and about 5.5% have three, and then it gets progressively lower and lower until there's less than 1% of people that actually own 6 properties or more. And that's not owning them outright, that's just having them, I guess, in your portfolio. So that negative gearing approach, it's very clear to see that it tapers off very quickly, that most people struggle to scale. And that's why many people are looking for, well, if I have to wait for this property market to move in my direction, then things are a little bit out of my control. And what happens if I need to sell the property halfway through and the market might be down? For example, Sydney and Melbourne, the markets were quite strong a couple of years ago, and then about 18 months ago, they turned around quite significantly. So some people who bought at the top of the market 18 months ago are now starting to struggle a little bit. So they have to wait for that cycle to move back in their direction. If they need to get some money out now, then they're going to struggle. So property investing is not really the mechanism for a lot of that for many. Dan says hi. So hi, Dan. How are you, mate? So property development, on the other hand, is where you actually put a lot of effort into the process. So it's not a passive approach, it's an active approach. So you're going to use your skills, your knowledge, your sweat equity to force value onto the property. And because it's going to be your skills and your knowledge, then it's really important that you're actually going to put a lot of effort into educating yourself, because you're the one who's going to be making decisions on your future. And what you do is, with that skill and with that knowledge, you're going to be able to purchase a property that you can force value on, whether it be through renovations, subdivisions, splitter blocks, townhouses, unit complexes, strata subdivisions. There's a gamut of different strategies that are out there, and they all work. But the biggest problem is that many people struggle to actually choose their one individual strategy, and they instead start to look at all strategies. And they have a thing called, that I like to call anyway, bright shiny object-itis. And so every time somebody brings them a deal, it doesn't matter what the deal is, you know, one day they're going to be looking at subdivisions, the next day they're going to be looking at townhouses, then they're going to be looking at renos, and they put all of this effort into analyzing different strategies, and they never get to know one strategy well, and they become a jack of all trades and master of none. So my guidance is, if you're going to look at all these strategies, you're going to be very narrow or very shallow in your knowledge, and you're going to be looking at a lot of strategies and very shallow in your knowledge. What my guidance is instead is to get one strategy, just one, that's all you need. Get very narrow in your focus, and then get very deep in your knowledge. The same amount of effort is going to go into learning that. And if you can, I guess, use your, be very, very strict with yourself and make sure that when somebody brings you another type of deal, that you actually push that away and you say, no, this is my strategy. This is the path that I'm going down. So once you've got your strategy in mind, and a lot of people struggle with trying to choose their strategy, and I've actually had a previous one of these sessions in talking about how to choose your strategy. So please go back and rewind and watch that. But once you've got that strategy in mind, all you need is one strategy in one council with 3 suburbs. And if you can get that narrowed down, then you're going to be highly successful in your property development journey. And the reason for that is that even with your one strategy, even when you get very good with your skills in learning that one strategy, each council that you go into, and there are 537 different councils in Australia, each council is going to have a different set of rules on how to execute that one strategy. So hypothetically, if you're going to choose townhouses, then when you go to one council, then what they're going to allow for the GFA in the area or the site coverage in the area is going to be completely different to what the council next door is going to allow. So if you start to learn this, if you start to look at multiple councils, then again, you're looking at lots of things very shallow. And instead, I want you to get very narrow, very deep. So if you get that one council, you're going to get to know those rules really, really, really well. You're going to get to know your strategy very, very, very well. And then from there, what we're going to get you to do is analyze every single suburb within that council and work out whether or not there's a high probability of success for your particular strategy in that suburb. And the reality is that every single strategy works, but it doesn't work everywhere. So by giving you a process and a mechanism to actually analyze that suburb to see whether or not that particular strategy is likely to be successful in that suburb, it's going to save you a hell of a lot of time and effort later on. So what we do is we forward plan our effort. We front load it, I should say. You put a lot of effort into where should I be farming for my opportunities. And then when you've worked that out, I try to encourage you to get that down to a maximum of 3 suburbs that are likely to be highly profitable in the process. Now, that sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but I can assure you from the number of people doing my course and the amount of effort that they put in, that the process to get there, but depending on how many suburbs are in your council, that's going to take about 3 to 4 months to try and narrow that down. And if you're in a council such as Brisbane City Council, which has got 190 suburbs, it's the largest one in the Southern Hemisphere, that may take you anywhere up to about 6 months to actually narrow those down. Now, the beauty is that once you have narrowed them down, now you can start to become an area expert in that particular council. So knowing what those rules are and knowing that suburb is highly likely to be successful, you can then start to identify all of the potential opportunities in that council to say, well, there might be, say, 300 sites in that particular suburb that have the potential for property development. Following your strategy. So what we'll get you to do is we'll then get you to put 10 minutes into analyzing every single one of those 300 properties and work out whether or not it actually complies with those rules that you were looking at. So I teach a toll gating system where we have a 10-minute toll gate, a 2-hour toll gate, and then a whatever it takes toll gate to try and work out how quickly we can throw a site away. And that's really what we want to get you to do, is the more properties that you throw away, the quicker you can do it, then the more time you've actually got to then spend on the ones that you don't throw away. And so by very definition, if you haven't thrown it away, it is therefore a reason to keep. So put 10 minutes in, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away, and then finally you go, well, there's one that passes that toll gate. Then you put 2 hours into that particular property. Look for reasons to throw it away. And if it passes the 10-minute toll gate and then the 2-hour toll gate, then you're now with a property that has a very high likelihood of success, and you're going to be investigating very hard as to whether or not you should be going to contract on that particular property. So from that 300, when you put that 10-minute check in, you're then going to probably whittle that 300 properties down to about 100 odd properties. Those 100 properties are, I guess, following a strategy that you know, in an area that you know is profitable, and you've now proven, I guess, their development capability. So now it's just a matter of time to try and, I guess, identify and target those properties, knowing that they're going to be, I guess, on your hit list. That's your hot list. Now, I've got a quick question from a couple here. So I can see Jason says, hi, great to be here again. That's great. Dave says, howdy, welcome, Dave. Jim has joined as well. Jason's got a question. Do you have a software package that you can help narrow down potential development site with a strategy? Yes, Jason, I do. I actually have some stuff with my own IP that I give the guys doing my property development formula program. It is really just a fancy Excel spreadsheet. What we do is we get you to do data extracts out of Price Finder and or RP data, depending upon which one you use. And you dump that raw data into the spreadsheet, and it helps you to actually identify patterns and the like to try and work out how and what you're actually going to be doing. How we work out whether or not a suburb is profitable is we run through a bit of a process where we try to reverse engineer that suburb, and we look at what is the finished product actually selling for. We know what our typical costs are in that development strategy because you've become that expert in that. You're going to know exactly what that FISO is. And I give them a piece of software which I call a rough cut FISO, where they can actually capture what is the the average purchase price of a raw site in the area? What is the average sale of the finished product in the area? What are your typical costs? And it's going to tell you within an order of magnitude whether or not that suburb is actually likely to be profitable or not. Now, I'm more than happy to share I guess the theory that sits behind it, but the actual IP and the software that sits behind it takes quite a bit of effort to actually get that to be efficient and effective. And so those guys that are doing the course actually get that. But thank you for your question, Jason. I appreciate that. Jason says, awesome, thanks. You're welcome. So effectively, that's what we're going to get them to do. They're going to do those data extracts, plug it into the suburb analysis, get those purchase prices and those sale prices. They're then going to plug those into our rough cut FISO. They're going to do that for every single one of the suburbs in the area, and it gives them a red light, green light as to whether or not it passes the profit potential that they're looking for, and also, I guess, their percentage profit on cost that they're after. And the way the process works is with that red light, green light type issue, you're going to be able to compare suburbs to see, well, in one area, yes, it might be profitable, but my money's not working as hard because the purchase price going in is a little bit more expensive than a suburb a couple over. So I can get a higher percentage profit on cost in this alternate suburb where it's a much lower entry cost. So it's really good from that perspective to help you to prioritize those. Once you then prioritize that, we have some other software. I'm working with a software developer to actually do a product which is not yet on market, but that software allows you to actually identify the opportunities out there by zoning and land size in your area, and it targets them and allows you to then keep notes on every single one of those properties. So you can then work out how and what the opportunity is, whether or not you want to keep it or not. You can categorize it and rate it. It will then actually allow you to do mail merges for any mail outs or things like that you're wanting to do, and allow you to keep track of that opportunity. So, as you've sent letters out and people have called you back, you're actually keeping the notes about that property in this software. So watch out for that, Jason. That is actually coming. It is in beta release at the moment, which means that we've got a small number of people actually testing that. There's about 100 people testing that software right now, and we're hoping that in the next 3 to 6 months, that's actually going to be production ready and able to hit the market. So watch this space, Jason. I guess that allows you then to, as I said, track those opportunities, and it's going to make your instead of using Excel spreadsheets, it's going to be a lot more graphical, and even be able to import data in from external data sources and those sorts of things. So a great place to actually keep that. So what is called a CRM, a customer relationship management platform, is really what that is. So that was a little bit of a deviation off target, but I think very well worthwhile under the circumstances. So I guess what are the benefits of property development? Because it's an active strategy, you then get to force that value onto the property. Once you've forced that value on, I highly recommend that you have assessed the site and your exit strategies up front. So before you actually purchase, you need to know what your intention is in exiting that deal or not exiting the deal, depending upon your circumstances. Because your exit strategy is really critical in how you actually acquire the property, the kinds of issues and challenges you're going to have with regards to entities. Are you looking for asset protection? Are you looking for tax minimization? If you're doing long-term holding of the profits, then those sorts of things actually come into play. But in the first few deals that you're going to do, chances are your exit strategy is likely to be that you're going to sell everything down, cash it in, and build your nest egg so that you can then start to do larger and larger projects. Now, I'm not wanting you to go big bang because you can blow yourself up, but if you start with a small one, build up your nest egg, and then go for a slightly bigger one, and then build up your nest egg, and then go for a slightly bigger one, eventually you're going to get to a point where you're doing deals that are large enough that the profit that you make in cash can then actually be instead kept as stock. And if you keep it as stock, there's a couple of really great advantages to that process. Firstly, if you don't actually cash it in, then you don't realize your profit. And if you don't realize your profit, then you don't pay tax on it. Now, it's not a tax avoidance strategy. I want to be very clear in that. It's a tax deferral strategy, because at some point in the future, and it might be 5 years, it might be 50 years in the future, you're going to sell that property. You will pay tax at that point. But if you, I guess, keep that, then you're going to, I guess, have the full benefit of 100% of the profit that you made in capital, and you're also going to have a positively geared property, and you're going to avoid those negative geared, I guess, outcomes that we were talking about before, where most property investors get trapped going into it a little bit incorrectly. Now, the most stereotypical profit margin that many people talk about out there is a 20% profit on cost type return. So if we just use that as an example, if you did a project that was large enough that it had 6 of whatever product that you're creating, so let's just say 6 townhouses, then as a 20% profit on cost, if you sell 5 of those down, then you're effectively going to be paying out the entire debt of the entire project. The 6th one, if you keep it, you're going to own that outright, and it's going to be 100% positively geared, with all of the capital actually sitting there in place. Now, that means that you've got that capital, so you can use that for security going into another loan. You've got the cash flow, which is going to allow you to borrow more money in the next loan. So then starts to allow you to accumulate quite quickly. And when we go back to those stats that I was talking about before, with having a comfortable lifestyle as a couple, only needing $60,000 a year, you only need two of those properties owned outright, and you've hit what the ASFA deemed to be typical retirement figure. But no doubt, once you've actually got your ball rolling, you're going to want to say, that's not enough. I want to go for something bigger. I want to have nicer lifestyles. I want to have longer holidays. So chances are, and if you're anything like me, you just want to keep your brain active, and you're going to keep on working. But the point is that you have choices at that point in time. I can see a couple of questions or comments coming through. I'm just going to check that. No, it's just a couple of people joining. So Tangem, Adrian, and Lynn. So welcome all, folks. So yeah, I guess the ultimate outcome is to get to do a project that is large enough that you can actually keep them. So that is really what you're aiming to do. And the bigger the projects are, the more likely that you can keep more and more property in it. So if you're doing 12, you can keep 2. If you're doing 24, you can keep 4, those sorts of things. So if you do a small, then a medium, then a large project, it's not going to take you very long in order to get out of the rat race. Especially when you look at, I guess, depending upon the strategy that you choose. If you're doing subdivisions, then about 9 months is fairly typical to do that. If you're doing townhouses, you might be closer to 24 months for each deal. So it's only 3 deals and you're out, folks. And that's the beauty of property development and how and why to get into it. But the key thing is, now that you've chosen that strategy, you really want to get educated on that one strategy. And there are hundreds of courses out there, folks. I, of course, do sell a course, so I'm going to tell you wonderful things about my course. But honestly, if you've got a particular strategy in a particular niche that you want to do, I highly recommend that you go do that particular educator's course. There are tons of really good educators selling really good courses. But if you do a course, whilst their content might be great, if it doesn't fit the strategy that you want, then it's not going to serve the purpose that you need. And so I see a lot of people who collect a lot of courses before they've worked out their strategy, and they do the course and then they work out that wasn't for them. And for those people, that money is wasted. For other people, they get their strategy clear in upfront, and they go do the exact same course and they get heaps of value out of it. So it's not the course that has changed. It's the intention and the outcome that people are actually trying to seek out of that process. So I can see a couple of questions here. So Dave says, so no tax deferring the sale, but would pay tax on the income from the property? Yes. So yes, Dave, just to be clear, if you don't sell the property, then you don't pay tax on, I guess, the sale of that or the profit of that particular deal. but any income that you get from rent would actually then be deemed income tax. Depending upon the entity that you're actually owning that in, you may be able to wash that through a couple of other locations. So, you know, tax minimization is legal, tax avoidance is not. So we can teach you some very good tax minimization and tax deferral mechanisms. The longer you can defer your tax, the more you can actually effectively use your funds at hand. The key point that I meant to say before about that tax deferral, and I didn't, if in that hypothetical project I was talking about, you had the sixth property, if you actually sold that, then depending upon the entity that you're in, and most people are going to do developments in companies, you'd be paying 27.5 cents in the dollar company tax. You'd also be paying GST on that. So you're about 37.5 cents in the dollar down already. And then when you then distribute that to yourself from an income tax perspective, depending upon what tax bracket you're on, you may pay a little bit more again. But let's just use that 37.5 cents in the dollar, I guess, tax gone out. Effectively, that property is not allowing you to tap into that 100% of the profit that you actually made. Whereas if you keep it, now that 100% is sitting as equity in the deal. So the long-term capital growth is going to be on that full 100%. So that's the first advantage. The second advantage is because you've now got income from it, you can actually refinance that. You can take that to an 80% LVR. So yes, 20% of your equity is trapped in there, but 80% of it you can actually take out. So you're 17.5 cents in the dollar better off cash-wise by not selling it. Plus you've got the advantage of long-term capital growth by keeping the property. Plus you've got the advantage of the income stream that actually generates should you not choose to do any more properties. Or equally, it allows you to then scale because you've got better, I guess, borrowability. Or serviceability. Sorry, borrowability is not really a word, but hey, who knew? Okay, Michael says, Rob, why and how did you end up with your strategy of subdivisions? Excellent question, Michael. Everyone has a different reason for their strategies, and I guess I'm of an opinion that I could make a hell of a lot more money with a number of other strategies, and I guess money is not my motivator. So I'm going to start with that. Money is not my motivator. Money is a means to an end, but I do it for the sheer joy of doing the process and solving problems. And so rather than going big bang into much bigger projects, it has something that doesn't really appeal to me. But subdivisions in themselves are a nice, easy cookie cutter type approach. If you run your subdivisions well, you should be in and out of the deal in about 9 months. Okay, so that means property development is a negative cash flow situation. The only day you ever, so money leaves your pocket over and over as you pay consultants and application fees and councils and infrastructure charges and all sorts of things like that. And the only day you actually get paid is the day the project ends. And so subdivisions means that my payday comes back much quicker. So in 9 months, I get a payday. And if I'm running 3 or 4, and at the moment I'm about to go into my 5th project at the moment, if I'm running 5 projects at a time, I'm getting paid every 2 to 3 months. And rather than waiting for something like a townhouse project, which might take 2 or 2.5 years until that payday. 2.5 years with a negative cash flow is great if you've got a very large nest egg, but if you don't have a large nest egg, it means that it's going to be quite challenging to do that. So then taking on a second deal and a third deal and trying to escalate your deals if you're doing those longer strategies means that you've got much, much more money that's left your pocket. So your pockets need to be very, very deep to be doing strategies like that if you're wanting to do more than one at a time. So subdivisions allow me to increase the velocity of my money. So my money is turning over much quicker. I'm getting paid back much quicker. My percentage profit on costs, I do, I guess, the way I compare projects is to annualize the returns. So if you're getting a 20% return on a project that takes 2 years, you're effectively getting a 10% annualized return. Whereas if I'm doing a project that's going to get me let's just say it's going to be 7% return in 4 months, because some of my projects are that short. I've got a project right now that's only 4 months and a 7.5% return. That works out about 28% annualized return. So my money is working harder for me. The difference is I don't have as much money in the deal, which means I don't have as much risk, which means I can do more deals. So I can, one, I get my money back quicker. Two, I don't have as much money going out of my pocket. Three, I can run more deals at a time. And four means that how hard my money is working is much harder than those other type strategies. So that the larger townhouse or unit type strategies. The real difference between the two is, whilst a townhouse strategy might be a lower return, it's a lower return on a much bigger number. So when the money comes in, the sheer amount of money that comes in is a lot, and it comes through like a fire hose. So if you can afford that negative cash flow, then they are great strategies to do. But for me, it means that I can keep those things running, and I've done them so many times, I can almost do them blindfolded. So it's like a cookie cutter for me, which means it allows me the time, and retirement is really just buying yourself time. It allows me the time to do exactly what I'm doing and running around the country, teaching other people how I can do that. I don't know that I would have that level of time if I was doing 4 or 5 townhouse projects or 4 or 5 commercial property type transactions. So thank you for the question, Michael. Hopefully that helps. I have another Michael asking a question as well. So Michael says, and the depreciation helps supercharge net yield on the stock you keep. That is absolutely correct, Michael. So long as it is a brand new property, then yes, you can depreciate that, or a substantially renovated if renovation is your tactics. But there's check with your accountant about what substantial renovations actually means. Michael says, oh no, he said the same thing twice. So Brad says, what strategy would you recommend for a first development project? So Brad, rather than me recommending a strategy, what I do is I teach a framework where you actually pick your own strategy. And the reason for that is everyone's circumstances are completely different. How much money you've got access to, how much negative cash flow you can afford, how much time you've got, what your skills are, all of those sorts of things are going to be different for everybody. So there is no one size fits all, okay? So I teach a framework that goes through all of the pros and cons, the risk levels, the amount of cash needed, and allows you to look at your own personal circumstances and see what strategies don't work for you, so you can immediately rule out some that you might have had delusions of grandeur on, because you can see they're simply not going to suit your particular circumstances. That will then narrow it down to the ones that will fit your personal circumstances. And then from there, you then start to work out where you've got the most level of affinity with regards to, there's some things that you might be able to do that might have a similar cash flow or a similar risk type position. And some people love doing renovations because they love getting their hands dirty, and other people hate it. So when you compare a renovation versus a subdivision, which are very similar, cash flow positions, you may have a personal affinity for one over the other. And I'm not going to try and persuade you on that. But the beauty is that once you've gone through that framework and chosen that strategy, you then know how to go and educate yourself about who's the best person out there to try and teach me how to do that strategy. If you want to learn how to do renovations, I'm not your guy. There are plenty of educators out there that do that. If you want to learn how to do high income cash flow properties with a rent per room, I've got plenty of those, but I'm not the educator for you. If you want to learn how to do units, townhouses, or subdivisions, then I think that fits very squarely in my niche. But the key is that once you've got that strategy, go and find someone who can actually do that. And don't get confused with, the hype that some of them go out there with, because some of the strategies they're teaching are not development strategies at all. They're actually acquisition strategies. So be very, very careful that your development strategy and your acquisition strategy are two different things. So I can, for example, I can do my subdivisions, I can do them with an outright purchase, as one acquisition strategy. I can do it with a delayed settlement as another acquisition strategy. I can do it with an option contract as another acquisition strategy, and I can do it with a joint venture. All four of them are perfectly legitimate ways to do to acquire the property or control the property. Whereas if you're going in with just one acquisition strategy in mind, then that deal may still be a deal, but you don't have the arsenal in your kit bag to know how and what tool to throw at it in order to do that deal. So just be careful with that. Okay, and Michael says thank you. So noting that we're coming into the 40-minute mark, folks, if you've got any questions at all, now's the time to ask them. There's a little bit of a lag between you typing a question and it coming up on screen, so please ask anything about what you would like in this particular topic. But I guess whilst I'm waiting for those questions to come through, I will remind everyone I am going into a lot more detail on, I guess, the how to start in property development at our info sessions that are coming up, I guess, before our meetup events next month at Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney. So those dates for those, Sydney will be the 27th of July, Melbourne will be the 3rd of August, and Brisbane will be the 17th of August. So if you want to know a lot more detail, if you want to meet myself and Tony Meredith, who helps me out with some of our courses, get to know us personally and see whether or not we are a good fit for you, then we would love for you to come, I guess, both to our meetup and also to the info sessions that we're going to be holding prior to those. Brad says, thanks, Rob. And Clint has just joined. Clint, you've just come in at the tail end, mate. So firstly, welcome aboard, but all the gold has been said about half an hour ago. So be sure to rewind. As I can't see any other questions coming through, folks, I'll give it another minute or two before I sign off. But any questions would be, it's a lot better when there's interaction here. So has anyone got a particular question with regards to a strategy that they're thinking about? If I go back to Brad's question, what strategy would you recommend? As I said, I teach a framework, Brad, but my guidance, rather than saying do this strategy, my guidance to you would be do a strategy that you can that is comfortable to you and you can scale with over time. That fits your time criteria. So time is the most valuable asset you're ever going to have. And if you're having to work your buns off to run a project, you don't have time for anything else, then that's not going to work. So I find that my subdivision strategies work for that. Renovation strategies are a lot more hands-on, and so if you don't have time, that's kind of going to hurt you a little bit. If you're doing townhouse projects, they can be time intensive at times, and there are other times in it where you're not going to have, you're going to have plenty of free time. A lot of the strategies that you're going to do, you'll find have a hurry up and wait approach. So you'll do a whole bunch of effort up front, and then you'll lodge it with council and you'll sit back and you'll wait, for them to come back. Or you'll go and ask a question of a consultant and you'll put a lot of prep work into, I guess, your questions into the consultant, and then you wait for them to come back with the answers. And then when they've come back with the answers, then you do another little scurry of work, and then you wait again. And so it's this constant hurry up and wait type process. So when you look at your time requirements, you have to work out from a project management point of view where you think those bumps are going to be, and whether or not you think that's going to fit in with your lifestyle. So hopefully that helps you, Brad. Margaret's got a question. They're finally starting to come through. So Margaret says, thanks, Rob. Really appreciate your information. Totally really relevant for me. So thank you, Margaret. Margaret, going way back, has been in our community for a very long time. And I think came to her first meetup way back in 2012 when we were very embryonic. So, but haven't seen you for a while, Margaret. So please come back. We miss you. Clint says, will do. Brenda has just joined. So welcome, Brenda. We're just at the point of signing off. So please make sure that you go back and rewind and get plenty out of this. And Jason says, love these sessions, really has me thinking. I will be jumping on board with your course in the future. Don't have a date at the moment. Sorry, you don't have a date, or I don't have a date, because I do have a date. The date is the 11th to 13th of October is when we're actually starting, I guess, the next round of course. And there is a pre-course, which is a mindset event that I highly recommend everybody to do. Whether you do my 12-month course or not, I highly recommend you do the mindset events. We are going to be running them in Melbourne and Sydney only this year. So in Melbourne, we're going to be running those on the 7th and 8th of September. And in Sydney, we're going to be running those on the 24th and 25th of August. But if you're looking at doing the whole program, the 11th to 13th of October. So Clint says, how do you sequence bringing more work on with townhouses so you don't overload with work? That's all about project management and understanding project management philosophies and how that works there, Clint. So when you look at what is called a schedule of works, so every single thing that needs to be done is a task. So you put that into a project management piece of software, you capture all of those tasks, and you say, this task is dependent on this previous task having been performed. And so therefore, these two are actually sequentially reliant on each other. You look at how much time and effort is going to be working into those, and you try and schedule how that's going to happen. So when you plot it out, you might have 1,000 tasks that you need to do in the project, but you don't need to do painting of the outside of the building when you haven't yet laid the foundations for the building. So you lay them out in a particular order. That gives you what is called a critical path. And it says, well, this particular task depends on this task, depends on this task, depends on this. So I must do those in order. And then there's a whole bunch of other tasks that can be done in any order whatsoever. And so your job, Clint, is to look at that critical path, predict how and where those peaks are going to happen, because at that point, if you can't start the next task before the previous task, then at the moment the previous task finishes, you must get onto that next task in order to kick that off. Otherwise, your whole project gets delayed. Whereas other tasks will just float and they don't have any predependencies at all. So you can do them at any time you like. And so what you do is you have these peaks that are going to happen that are mandatory. And then you've got the valleys where you can do a whole bunch of optional work in there. So your job, Clint, is then to look at your particular project, see where your peaks are, and see whether or not you've actually got any room to add another project to fit in with where the valleys are. That'll take you a little while to actually work out. I would highly recommend not doing 2 townhouse projects on your first attempt. I would run one project through to completion, get a good feel for it, and then take on 2 or 3 after that, hoping that helps in that regard. Jason says, I don't have a date. Oh, okay, Jason, you don't have a date. Well, I've got plenty of dates, mate. We do our e-takes twice a year. No rush, mate. You don't have to race to the back of the room. You're not going to get any steak knives. We will keep running the courses, and eventually when you're ready, we'll be there, mate. So take your time. Margaret says, see you soon. Good, Margaret. Glad for that. Jason says, you changed the Brizzy one. Damn, okay, I'll see you. I have a workaround. Okay, I don't think we did change the Brizzy one. Maybe I misquoted a previous session, but Brisbane Info session is the 17th of August, which is the 3rd Saturday of every month in Brisbane. So we follow patterns, Jason. So in Melbourne, it's the 1st Saturday of every month. Brisbane, it's the 3rd Saturday of every month. And Sydney, I should say, is the 4th Saturday of every month. That's the only way I can keep my life sane. So that said, folks, we've come to about 49 minutes, so just coming up to the hour. I'm going to sign off. I can see Noel has just joined. So hi, Noel. Bye, Noel. Please rewind and watch this. Hope you guys got plenty out of that, and we'll see you next Sunday at 5 o'clock for our next Sunday session. Bye for now.